1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Pardon? Little more. Mary had a little lamb.
Probably help if I put this thing on, huh? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good afternoon and welcome once again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We're coming to you broadcasting from the studios of the American Guns and Glory Network here in Las Vegas, Nevada. This show is about guns, related political issues, and primarily self-defense issues. The Fired Up is now available on our website, firedupwithbobirwin.com. A new show is posted every Thursday at around 5 p.m. Pacific time. This one's going up a little bit early because of scheduling problems. New shows appear on YouTube, at least at the moment, and numerous other media. The audio feed of the show is rebroadcast for radio listeners on Saturdays at noon on the Nevada Talk Network. You can check out KELY1230.com for a station in your area. If you have questions or comments, send an email to bob@firedupmail.com or leave a message on my office recorder at home, 702-257-1060. That number will appear on the crawl just below me from time to time during the show. If you leave contact information, we will respond by email, text, or telephone. Questions directed to our guests will be forwarded to that guest. There are several hundred defensive uses of firearms every week in the United States, rarely covered by any mainstream media unless they're bad use of firearms. So we always present a few for our listeners' education. Some I pick out are good shooting, some are questionable, sometimes they're just plain wrong, but I use them because they're educational for firearms owners. As Fired Up is a nationwide show, individual incidents, you must remember, are generally always adjudicated under local law. The results or the advice given here may not apply to listeners in different jurisdictions. The advice given here is simply intended to keep you safe, out of jail, and help prevent losing a civil lawsuit. My guest today is retired U.S. Customs agent and firearms instructor, my friend Lenny Davis. Lenny, a bit of your background, if you would, for new listeners.
Thank you. My name is Lenny Davis. As Bob said, I'm retired U.S. Customs and Department of Homeland Security Special Agent. I've also spent 10 years as a subject matter expert for the U.S. Department of State in their Global Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. And I am currently now the owner and Chief Operating Officer of SRT Special Services, a private investigations and security firm based here in Las Vegas.
All right. This first story is initially from News 4 SA, they call themselves, in San Antonio, Texas. And the larger volume of it was actually written by a newspaper, the Victoria Advocate, which is in Virginia. So it's a two-source story, and it has some, I always try to give everybody credit where I got this stuff. This was reported on the 22nd of this month, just a few days ago, in Yoakum, Texas. A 19-year-old went to a home on Bootlegger Lane just before 3 in the morning to pick up his girlfriend, who was there with her older sister. The older sister's 36-year-old husband was also at home. Background is this 19-year-old didn't want his girlfriend around them, apparently causing a long history of bad blood between the two men. Deputies investigating found evidence indicating the husband was arguing with the 19-year-old before the two exchanged gunfire. The 19-year-old left the scene and was found at his home in Cavaca County. Multiple officials from different agencies arrived at his home and arrested him. Investigators in this case found 11 bullet holes from a .223 rifle and 2 pistol rounds from a .40 caliber in the truck of the 19-year-old intended victim. He had apparently gone out. He was outside trying to drive away, I guess, and the 19-year-old, if he hadn't been crouching down in the seat, he would have certainly been shot and likely killed. I mean, this just got sprayed. The number of bullets fired by the 36-year-old stood in stark contrast to the single shot fired from the 19-year-old's bolt-action .22 rifle, actually described in the police reports as an antique. He had gone to the home with only a single round chambered in this rifle and no other ammunition. The 19-year-old, however, was arrested because the 36-year-old, the husband, died. He was arrested and held by the DeWitt County Jail on a murder charge and was imprisoned for 55 days, unable to make the $500,000 bail. The 13 bullet holes that riddled the 19-year-old's pickup was powerful evidence of self-defense to the grand jury. The prosecutor took this to the grand jury, and what happened is the grand jury failed to indict. That kind of cinched it, said District Attorney Bob Lassman. After reviewing the case's evidence, the grand jurors chose to clear the 19-year-old of all criminal charges. It's their call, it's their choice, the DA said, adding, I think they made the right decision. The law is you are allowed to return deadly force when deadly force is being used against you. Duh. What the problem was here, under the statutes, we have two people shooting at each other and one guy killed the other, so the guy who inflicted the deadly shot was the one that got taken to jail. He was lucky to survive the onslaught. The mistakes he made was, one, he left the scene and didn't call 911, and that left the police only to get the story from the now deceased guy who said he came over here and was disrupting my house and we had an argument and I shot at him to get rid of him and he drove away. Well, that's what the wife said, the girl's mother that he was trying to rescue. Obviously, if he went there to get into a fight, he would have brought more than one cartridge for his rifle, don't you think? The grand jury sees the real truth and sets the true victim in this incident free. The most practiced shooter generally wins against even incredible odds. Just amazing that all those rounds were fired and
when I first read this story, I was like, wow. I can tell you that, one, I don't blame this kid for, I think I want to back up a little bit on the mistakes this kid made. The only one I think this kid made, other than the obvious, look, if you're going to go to someplace and thinking you're going to have a gunfight, maybe have more than an antique single shot bolt action round, a gun with only one round in it. But when he left the scene, he should have called 911 as soon as he got home or whatever. I myself wouldn't have waited around to see if the guy was dead or not when he's shooting AR and .40 caliber. So it means obviously he either had a malfunction with the AR and transitioned to his .40 cal or vice versa. But this guy threw a lot of lead at this kid in the truck, and he's very, very lucky to survive it. And I wouldn't have waited around to see if, when I fired my one shot at .22, I don't think I would have waited around either. At the end of the day, this was one of those very, very lucky he's alive, very lucky that the grand jury saw it his way and that he's not going to get prosecuted for this.
Sometimes the grand jury sees it the way it really is. And obviously the prosecutor, from his comments, agreed with that when they looked at all the information that was available. The prosecutor even came back and said the grand jury made the right decision. He was apparently obligated to either prosecute, and he apparently didn't want to do that, so he took it to a grand jury. I've seen that happen in the legal system more than once. Mm-hmm. You go to a grand jury, the prosecutor does, hoping that they won't indict, and that's your ticket out, that you don't, you did your best, you can say to the other side, and the grand jury chose not to indict him. But you look at this, I mean, anybody looking at the evidence would go,
Yeah, this
Yeah, this is ridiculous.
this
If he'd just not run away and then not called 911.
And again, not yeah, I think the call 911. And another teachable moment to this whole thing too is the fact that you know, you can have the biggest, baddest caliber. Now, this guy had two very, very potent caliber weapons. The decedent, he had a 5.56 or 223 rifle, and he had a 40 caliber handgun. But if you can't put rounds on target, they don't matter. A miss, you know, I used to say it, a hit with a 22 is better than a miss with a 44. Well, here's proof that hit with a 22 is better than a miss with a 5.56 and a 40 caliber.
Yeah, this is kind of, we always harp that the best shot, the most practiced and the best shot normally wins. This was just
I think this was giant luck. He should have been
a miracle.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's free, and I assume him and his bride-to-be are off somewhere now. The high bail was the killer. He was in jail for 55 days. There's no, you couldn't imagine how disrupting that is to your life.
Yeah.
If anybody reading this tape, if you just all of a sudden, bam, you're gone for 3 days, how would that change your life? I mean, it's dramatic. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to break 1 second for a word from one of our sponsors, and we will be right back. Don't go away.
My name is Jerry Creed, and I'm a gun trust attorney. If you want to own an NFA firearm, a gun trust is a great way to own it because it allows multiple people to lawfully possess a firearm instead of just a single individual. I have reviewed lots of gun trusts, and I have found they often don't include the forms you need to bring people on as trustees and remove them as trustees. In addition, a gun trust will save you the cost of probate and avoid probate, and it can protect your executor and family members. You know, there isn't an element of intent in these laws that affect the NFA firearm possession. So it doesn't matter if your wife didn't intend to sell the gun at a garage sale or yard sale, or your daughter didn't intend to drive the car with the silencer in the trunk. A gun trust is a great way to protect your family members and friends and share in the fun and pleasure of owning NFA weapons. If you want a gun trust done right, remember to trust Jerry.
And we are back. This next story comes to us from WDEF. I couldn't make that up. News 12 Now in Athens, Tennessee. This also took place on the 22nd of this month, a few days ago. A shooting happened around 10 a.m. Sunday morning at Country Road 675 south of Athens, if any of you Tennesseans know where that happens to be. Detective Jared Price said it appears that the resident went out to check on his outbuildings when he discovered two suspects, later found to be the age 36 and 30, ransacking one of them. He'd gone out, as his normal process. He was carrying a gun. In rural areas, that's in any area, that's a good idea. You're going to go check your backyard. If you think something might be wrong, carry a gun, that's fine. Anyway, he found these two guys. The shed was ransacked. They were apparently tossing everything, looking for valuables. He pulled the gun, held him at gunpoint, and then he was assaulted by the 36-year-old suspect. They didn't detail out what assaulted meant, but apparently the guy charged him or swung at him or something. He defended himself by firing his handgun. The arriving deputies found the 36-year-old suspect had already been shot and was now being held at gunpoint by the property owner. The suspect was taken to the Knoxville hospital with non-life-threatening injuries to his wound. Apparently no big deal. The property owner had suffered a break-in and theft the day before, according to McMinn County Sheriff Joe Guy. The second suspect fled the scene, but the sheriff himself personally captured the 30-year-old in a field along Country Road 700 about an hour later. In rural areas, when somebody flees the scene, it's generally pretty easy to
Perimeter in the cornfield.
he's on foot. The start with advice is never fully believe a cooperating suspect. He might well be conning you. You know, this is ABC police training, which this guy was not a police officer, so I can't expect him to do that. You keep your distance, keep all the criminals in view. If there's more than one, back up far enough. You don't have to keep turning your head. You can see everybody. The property search is certainly reasonable, but finding the open door was a clue for this guy to call 911 and wait a safe distance away. As usual, I have to mention the partner in crime here fled, leaving his wounded associate to his fate. There is little honor among thieves. Lenny?
Well, yeah.
Where do you start?
Yeah, I don't blame you. And I will correct you on one thing, though, Bob, because even I live here in Las Vegas in a rural area. I got a pretty good sized piece of property, but if there's something outside at night that I didn't think was right, I'd be going out armed with a handgun, not necessarily in a rural area. But that being said, if I went out and found an open door in a outbuilding that I know was not open before, you were absolutely right, Bob. You know, back off, call 911, keep an eye on it. You never make an entry into a structure by yourself. I teach classes all over the world for crisis response team for the State Department, which is basic SWAT. You never, ever, ever make an entry into a room by yourself. That's the law. That's just, it's as good as the law of physics. You never try to clear a place by yourself. You hold what you have and control that exit. The other thing that we would do is, if, as Bob said, if you were a cop, if you had been trained by a police officer, distance is life, folks. So get back away from me. Got these guys at gunpoint. Get them on the ground. Get them face down on the ground. Tell them to lay down on the ground and then back away from them. Don't get to where they can get up and get you. Obviously, this guy, he held a gun on him, probably saw one too many old cowboy movies where Roy Rogers had the gun on the guy and hands up and they never moved and he was 1.5 feet away from him. Actions are faster than reactions. They'll move faster than you can react to it. So in the real world, get them on the ground, get back away from them. And if they come and attack you, like this guy did, use your weapon to defend him. If they get up and run away, you really don't have you may not have the legal right to shoot them. So here in Nevada, you probably wouldn't unless you knew they were armed and they posed a threat. But if they just jumped up and ran off into the brush, let them go. But again, remember that distance is life. Stay away from these people. Get some distance. If you got them on the ground, they're not going to be able to get up off the ground and hurt you if you're back away from them. So get some distance, get control of them, call 911, and let the cavalry get there.
Yeah, that's really sound advice. I mean, I recall when we were teaching I was teaching police academies years and years ago. We would always instruct the cadets, put the guy on the ground, face down. If you're confronted with this guy and he refuses to get down on the ground, it's a separate problem. First, you put him face down, and then you change positions so he can't see where you are. Because when he suddenly jumps up and he doesn't know where you are, he's going to lunge in the wrong direction. And that'll give you another chance. The other solution, of course, and the reason this works for police, is if he doesn't want to get on the ground, that's why God made pepper spray and tasers and nightsticks. There's all sorts of tools the officers are carrying to let them do this safely. Plus, all of their buddies are already on the way, with more tools and equipment and whatever. When you're there by yourself,
Your odds are...
Get away from them. Just get away. And if they got to chase you down the road, then fine. If they chase you down the road, now they're the one supplying the force, and you can probably
Yeah,
safely shoot. But
You're absolutely right. And you know, if you've got a guy that's not cooperating with you, get away from him. Get back from him. If he keeps coming at you, then that's your legal right to defend yourself because you'd be in fear of your life. But get away from him. Don't let him. Don't get so close to him. Back away. Tell him to stay there and not to move, and wait for the cavalry to get there.
we're going to, I'm going to run right on to the next story. I may have time to do the other commercial that we've got in the queue, but I may not. So we're going to go to the next story, which is from WFIE 14 News. This was on the 19th of this month, so it's really old now. It's 3 days older than the other two. This is in Vanderburgh County, Indiana. Deputies say two Evansville men were arrested after a home invasion in this Darmstadt district Thursday night. It happened in the 1200 block of Wortman Road, in case you're from the area. Residents say a man they knew and another man showed up and walked in uninvited to the house these two guys lived in. The intruders told a woman in the home to go get her husband, who was at that moment in the shower. This article did not say when the confrontation happened, if the guy had got his pants on, but you can visualize whatever you want. One of the two guys that they knew followed her into the bedroom and started punching the husband. The woman tried to stop him, but she was punched in the face for her trouble. There were pictures in the report. She had a lot of bruises. She was punched pretty hard by an adult grown-up male. Deputies say after several minutes of fighting, the suspects ran off with prescription medication they stole from the house. Okay, so far so good. The resident male grabbed his shotgun and started to chase the intruders, now robbers, outside. He fired 2 shots which failed to hit the fleeing men. Responding deputies spotted the suspect's car, initiated a traffic stop, pulled it over, and the suspects surrendered. Both are facing now several charges in which there's a laundry list here of home invasion and assault and battery and stealing, and the list is, even in Nevada, that would be an incredibly long list with what happened there. Beating up on a woman, whatever. Here, it's a good thing that the shots missed. We've talked about warning shots over and over, and perhaps they were warning shots in this case. They didn't detail it out. I don't think they knew that. The guy fired one in the air, and if the perps are leaving the house, whatever situation you've got, and the perps of the crime are now leaving, the I fired in self-defense theory is just evaporates. There is no way you're going to have this be a good shooting if you hit somebody. Let the cops do the chasing. Here we go again with Bob's lecture. They have the training, the body armor, and lots of friends on the way. And on top of that, they got free lawyers if something goes wrong here. Charge on.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, regardless of what former Vice President Joe Biden said, firing a couple of rounds of a shotgun outside is never a good idea, because what goes up must come down, and if he'd have hit these individuals, he would have had a problem. They were fleeing the house. They were no longer a threat. There's no way you could say they were a threat. We had a case here several years ago in Las Vegas. A very similar situation. 2 guys were in burglarizing a guy's house. He came home and interrupted them. They used a stun gun on him, knocked him down, tied him up in his bedroom, and continued to burglarize his home. Well, they weren't great rope knot tires they flunked out of Boy Scout camp because they couldn't tie good knots. He got himself free, and they weren't very good at ransacking his bedroom because he got a Mossberg 12-gauge pump shotgun and armed himself and went after him. He encountered one of them in his kitchen, which he fired and killed the man, and that was a good shoot. The other guy, who was in the process of coming through the door between the kitchen and the garage, and they had the garage door open, he turned and fled. The victim, he followed him down the street about 50 yards, and then fired another shot, striking the suspect in the back and killing him. It was a really good shoot. There would not have been any charges against this homeowner had he never left his house. But when he chased this guy down the street, the guy was obviously no longer a threat. Their car was there. There would have been plenty of forensic evidence to convict him, find him and convict him. But he got mad and he chased him down the street, and he ended up pleading out to voluntary manslaughter. He was very lucky that the district attorney at the time only asked for probation, and he was given 5 years probation, but he was a convicted felon for the rest of his life. So, folks, if you have a home invasion sort of like this was, and they leave, I've told you many times before, we call what the door the fatal funnel. Arm yourself and stay inside that door. Make them come through that door, because you've got them in a very, very small area. So don't pursue these guys down the street, especially at night, and especially if it's a rural area. Don't chase them out into the brush. It's the same kind of principle as not clearing a room by yourself. So when in doubt, hole up, wait for the law enforcement people to show up, and arm yourself.
Enough said. I remember that case very well.
Yeah.
That guy was just incredibly lucky he wasn't in prison for a first-degree murder. I must have had a great defense lawyer. Didn't involve me. I wouldn't work on the case at all, but probably had a great defense expert.
Try not to pat yourself on the back so much.
Yeah, no, not my case. We're wrapping up. You can check out our recent shows at www.firedupwithboberwin.com. It contains our recent older shows, with the other ones beyond older than that being added soon. The commercials keep us on the air, so patronize our sponsors. We only had one today. Capitalism wins every time. We'll be back next Thursday on our website and on YouTube at the American Guns and Glory Network. When watching on any media, please hit subscribe on wherever it comes, and the shows will be sent to your computer or your phone automatically. Wow, my teleprompter, I misspelled automatically. Please share these broadcasts with your friends. Remember, the audio portion is repeated on the Nevada Talk Network. That involves now 18 stations all across Nevada on Saturdays at noon. You can find them all at KELY1230.com. Thanks for supporting Fired Up. We'll be back next week. Thank you, Lenny.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.